Waking up right in the middle of your own funeral is a massive disaster. But when this girl opens her eyes inside the casket, the terrified crowd realizes she is not just back from the dead. Something much more dangerous just took over her body. Our girl stares into a mirror, currently having a full-blown existential crisis over the fact that she has somehow possessed a stranger's body. She wonders how she even died in the first place, concluding she must have simply crossed over in her sleep. She figures possession is trendy right now, but she firmly believes the universe could have been a little less careless in picking its next victim. Deciding that dwelling on the past is a waste of time, she focuses on the massive problem at hand. The original owner of this body had just kicked the bucket, and our girl had the terrible luck of waking up right in the middle of the funeral, fresh out of the coffin.
What?
She realizes they were staring at her like she was a literal ghost. She mentally notes that coming back to life at your own funeral is a massive social faux pas that makes things painfully awkward for everyone involved. Panicking about how to handle the situation, she had decided to just go with her gut. Sitting up in her casket, she had casually asked for her own name, leaving the priest staring at her in absolute, paralyzed silence. Naturally, her casual resurrection did not go smoothly. She reflects on spending all of yesterday getting aggressively interrogated by the priest and the doctor, while she desperately tried to convince them that she had absolutely no idea what was going on either. Thinking about the whole ordeal makes her head spin, so she decides to just blame it on a medical miracle or a massive doctor's error. She figures things would be easier if she knew anything about the body's original owner, but thanks to this bargain bin possession, she has zero memories to work with. She complains that she did not even get the standard, convenient slideshow of past events. To make matters worse, she has no clue what genre she is trapped in, especially since the last thing she read was a martial arts novel, which is completely useless right now. Deciding there is no point in crying over spilled lives, she finds a new spark of determination to push forward and survive. Out in the garden, our girl takes a scenic stroll with a maid. She feels slightly lucky to have found a servant actually willing to speak to her, allowing her to finally learn that her new name is Evangeline Rohanson. However, even after 2 days of occupying this body, she is still utterly clueless about who the original girl actually was. She concludes that she has definitely landed in a villainous possession story, considering every single servant shakes like a leaf the second she enters a room. She remembers one young maid who literally begged for her life and had to be dragged away, leaving our girl wondering just how much of a nightmare the original Evangeline must have been to warrant such an extreme reaction. She thinks the previous owner could have at least tried being slightly less demonic. She notes that her new red eyes are a dead giveaway for a nasty personality in any romance fantasy world. She knows the classic trope where the ominous, abused girl gets offhandedly complimented by a random love interest, instantly making her fall head over heels. She wonders if a handsome guy is going to deliver that exact cheesy line to her soon, especially since she can already tell this body was treated terribly. She points out that her supposed father has not bothered to show his face, even once since his daughter literally returned from the dead. She figures he must truly despise her, because a normal person would at least visit out of pure curiosity. She mentally categorizes romance fantasy fathers as either completely devoted or absolute trash, realizing she definitely scored the trash option. To top off the ultimate cliché, she notes the mother died young. Hoping for some good news, our girl casually questions the terrified maid, asking if she happens to have a fiancé lying around. She enthusiastically asks for the juicy details on the local crown prince, the brooding Duke of the North, the Holy Maiden, or maybe a male saint. The poor maid stammers through her fear, crushing all of our girl's romantic dreams by revealing she is completely single. The crown prince is a middle-aged dad with 2 kids, and there is absolutely no Duke, Holy Maiden, or male saint to be found in this world. Realizing the maid is on the verge of fainting from sheer terror, our girl decides to spare her from further interrogation. She considers hunting for a hidden diary left by the original owner, but quickly realizes a massive flaw in her plan, noticing that she cannot read a single word of the writing in this world. She angrily wonders why she was given a perfect translation patch for speaking, but was left completely illiterate. The maid seizes the opportunity to escape, promising to buy a book to teach her the alphabet by tomorrow before sprinting away. Left all alone, our girl figures she might as well search for the diary while the coast is clear, officially kicking off her grand house exploration. She tears the place apart, checking under the bed, inside the bathroom, and across the living room, completely baffled about where a stupid diary could be hidden. Suddenly, she remembers the maid mentioning a specific room that the original owner never allowed anyone to enter. Hoping to find some juicy secrets, she approaches the forbidden door, immediately noticing an ominous trail of blood seeping from underneath it. She struggles with the heavy door, complaining about how stiff it is before finally yanking it open. The sheer force sends her tumbling to the floor, making her instantly regret not outsourcing this manual labor to a servant. Picking herself up, she peeks inside the room and immediately freezes in absolute shock at the horrifying sight waiting for her. The grim reality of the past comes into full focus. Evangeline Rohanson, the only daughter of the Count, had died a very public death. While the official story claimed she succumbed to an illness, the estate servants could never forget the pale figure swinging from the branch of a cherry blossom tree in full bloom. The vivid red petals and their rich, lingering fragrance had only masked a deeply tragic end. Because the real cause of death was a scandal best kept completely quiet, the resulting funeral was incredibly modest. They turned away visiting nobles with the illness excuse, leaving the room filled with only the estate servants and a handful of knights. It was a bleak affair, mostly because absolutely no one was bothering to shed a tear for the deceased. As the priest recited his prayers, an unsettling chill had drifted through the silent room. Suddenly, an unusually loud rustling sound broke the quiet, echoing like dry grass and shifting bones. The horrifying crackle of movement grew louder and louder, converging on the coffin until the terrified attendees began to murmur in panic. Snow-white hair cascaded out of the casket like a waterfall, looking less like soft threads and more like countless spiderwebs woven into a single, eerie stream. The corpse's eyelids fluttered open, revealing a pair of deep crimson eyes that looked less like precious rubies and more like the beating heart of a dangerous predator. Anyone who met the gaze of this newly awakened creature immediately held their breath in sheer terror. It was the chilling stare of something that absolutely should not exist and never should have risen from the dead. The sheer malice in those eyes made the onlookers feel like they should just end it all right there to escape her terrifying presence. The priest frantically cried out to God in his heart, desperately reciting a prayer that had absolutely zero effect on the situation. The reanimated corpse began to move, clenching its fists and slowly turning its head, looking exactly like an inhuman entity learning to pilot a brand new meat suit. Breaking the horrifying silence, the creature simply asked for its own name. The entity that had hijacked the body finished adjusting to its new form and smiled, looking genuinely pleased with its fresh upgrade. The dark truth of her arrival echoed through the remnants of an ancient, forbidden ritual, a method designed to summon a soul from the altar by defiling the earth with blood, drawing a mystic circle, and completing the dark rites to receive whoever would descend upon this world. Smirking with absolute confidence, our girl looked almost like a highly satisfied predator, fully prepared to conquer her new reality. Our girl bravely marches back to the forbidden room and yanks the heavy door wide open. Peeking inside, she discovers a massive collection of books, realizing this heavily guarded fortress doubles as a personal study. Glancing at the furniture completely shrouded in cloth, she assumes these are Evangeline's private drawings. She affectionately pictures the original owner as a deeply shy girl, aggressively guarding her embarrassing teenage art phases from the rest of the world. Figuring this is the perfect hiding spot, she decides the diary has to be somewhere in this room. Since she is currently functionally illiterate in this universe, she relies on the ancient art of process of elimination to find it. Anything with a printed title on the spine gets tossed. Anything as thick as a dictionary is immediately disqualified. She finally strikes gold, finding a suspiciously gloomy book with smudged ink and scribbled numbers. She mentally roasts the original owner's aggressively villainous taste in stationery before deciding to stash it away until her terrified maid returns with an alphabet book. Her grand plans are instantly derailed when she spots a bizarre geometric circle covered in weird symbols. She realizes it is a literal summoning circle hidden in the notes. She figures this novel's world building is painfully old-fashioned, since magical contracts are so last season, but she is not in a position to be picky. If she wants to survive this fantasy world on her own, she needs heavy artillery and is willing to do whatever it takes. Suddenly, she spots a bucket filled with suspicious red liquid. The terrifying trail of blood from earlier turns out to be nothing more than a spilled bucket of ordinary red paint. Ignoring the perfectly good paintbrushes sitting right nearby, she decides that smearing it with her bare hands is the only authentic way to execute dark magic. Plunging her finger into the bucket, she enthusiastically asks the universe to hook her up with a dragon or a spirit king, immediately getting to work on her new floor mural. Later that evening, the vibe in Count Rohanson's office is significantly less enthusiastic. Daisy the maid stands before him, trembling so violently, she looks like she might vibrate right through the floorboards, keeping her eyes clamped tightly shut. The Count is not actually a cold-hearted boss. Daisy is simply functioning at maximum panic capacity. Having been close friends with the late Evangeline regardless of their status differences, Daisy had bravely volunteered to spy on the creature, currently piloting her best friend's body. The Count calmly asks for a status report on what the entity has been doing. Daisy stammers that the monster used amnesia as a cheap excuse to interrogate everyone about Evangeline's habits and favorite foods. She explains how it paraded around in the lady's clothes, putting on a terrible performance while trying to mimic her. Daisy is absolutely horrified that the creature completely ignored the other maids fainting and begging for their lives, glaring at them with the icy contempt of someone looking at a moldy wall. She tearfully explains that the real Evangeline was so incredibly fragile, she would rather hurt herself than utter a single harsh word to anyone. Falling to her knees, Daisy profusely apologizes for having an emotional breakdown. The Count politely tells her it is fine and asks her to keep talking. Daisy reveals the entity claimed it could not read, which the Count immediately questions. Daisy confirms his fears, stating it was obviously a master manipulation tactic to get her out of the room. From her heavily traumatized perspective, she explains that the moment she left to get a book, the creature magically bypassed a keyless, locked door and broke into the forbidden study. Sneaking a peek, she witnessed the entity casually reading a book before drawing a demonic pattern on the floor using its own profusely bleeding fingertip. She reports that the monster was muttering dark incantations, and the only word she could clearly make out was contract right before it locked eyes with her. The Count's brain goes into sheer overdrive. He realizes this parasitic entity is already using blood sorcery to summon more monsters. He mentally curses the fact that his daughter's tragic suicide prevented a proper temple burial, leaving them completely vulnerable since not even a gallon of holy water could evict this squatter from her corpse. With absolutely zero solutions available, he accepts they have no choice but to keep monitoring the threat. He gently tells Daisy she needs to stay near it a while longer, but pauses, utterly baffled as to why she has been standing there with her eyes squeezed shut this entire time. Daisy cries out that she is terrified because the monster has been staring at her through the window for the entire meeting. The Count freezes in pure shock. Instinctively turning his head toward the glass, he comes face to face with a massive, terrifying cluster of eyeballs glaring right at him from the darkness outside. Meanwhile, completely oblivious to the absolute horror movie she just accidentally directed, our girl is currently tucked safely into her bed, sleeping like an absolute baby. The next morning, our girl wakes up to find herself sharing her bed with a remarkably chubby, three-eyed cat. She heavily questions the sheer quality of this alternate universe, wondering why even the local strays have to be extraordinary anomalies. Deciding not to look a gift cat in the mouth, she notes how absurdly cute and fluffy it is. Since it stays perfectly still while being petted, she decides to completely indulge herself, pulling the creature into a massive hug and aggressively showering it with affection. Her cuddle session is interrupted when a brand new maid enters to announce her morning routine, causing the cat to instantly dive for cover. Our girl is mildly confused by the staff change, wondering if they operate on a rotating shift system since she had just managed to bond with yesterday's maid. Hoping to use her adorable new roommate as an icebreaker, she casually asks if the estate keeps many cats. The maid absolutely destroys the cozy vibe by coldly stating that all the cats were eradicated a long time ago due to a nasty disease outbreak. Our girl mentally screams at the harsh reality of medieval fantasy tropes, instantly realizing that if her little three-eyed friend is discovered, it will be immediately put on the chopping block. Her panic spikes when the maid tilts her head, noting that she hears a cat crying nearby. Sweating profusely, our girl insists she hears absolutely nothing, internally begging the tiny creature to keep its mouth shut if it wants to keep breathing. Thankfully, the maid buys the terrible lie and leaves without tearing the room apart. Clutching her chest, our girl feels her heart violently return to its proper place. She realizes she has accidentally adopted an illegal fugitive whose entire family tree was likely wiped out by the household. Knowing she cannot just toss it outside to die, she figures she can simply have a priest or a doctor medically clear it for residency. She assumes no one would dare execute the Count's daughter's personal pet, deciding her best bet is to formally ask for her father's permission. Her grand plan hits a massive wall when the elderly butler approaches to inform her that his lordship is far too busy to see her. She mentally slaps her forehead, remembering the tiny detail that her new father absolutely loathes her guts. The butler then executes a flawless 90-degree bow, offering to relay a message instead. Watching the poor old man fold himself in half, she shudders, wondering just how much of a demonic tyrant the original Evangeline was to command this level of terrified respect. She raises her hand to wave off the formality, only for the butler to violently flinch like he is bracing for an impact. Realizing her reputation is completely beyond repair, she drops her hand and simply asks if keeping a cat is strictly prohibited. The butler nervously touches his shoulder and looks down, clarifying that a pet is perfectly fine as long as it consumes holy water. Soon enough, our girl watches the cat happily lap up a pan of holy water. While the butler and maid observe the hydration session, our girl fiercely questions the estate's animal ethics, completely baffled as to why they went on a massive feline elimination spree if the disease was entirely curable with a little blessed tap water. The butler formally confirms the cat is safe and makes his quick exit. The maid chimes in with a seemingly helpful suggestion, advising our girl to embroider the cat's name on a collar so the other violently paranoid staff members do not attempt to hunt it down. Thrilled by the brilliant idea, our girl celebrates the fact that she has finally made a friend in this hostile household. However, the moment she points out that she is entirely illiterate and cannot actually write a name, the maid promptly vanishes from the room. Left completely alone again, our girl remembers that the previous maid who promised her an alphabet book also pulled a vanishing act. She realizes that despite everyone trembling in fear around her, she might be the victim of a quiet, coordinated bullying campaign, perfectly matching a very sad modern fantasy trope. Overcome with frustration, she bursts into tears, dramatically apologizing to the cat for being such a useless owner who cannot even write its name. The stress of this high-stakes possession is finally getting to her. Meanwhile, the cat just stares back at her with a highly serious, slightly creepy intensity. Later that day, she decides to test her luck with a book and is absolutely stunned to find that she can suddenly read every single word perfectly. She assumes the universe finally granted her a convenient possession buff out of pure pity for her feline-induced breakdown. Filled with newfound joy, she immediately prepares to embroider her baby's name. Her enthusiasm crashes and burns instantly. Despite her newfound literacy, the original owner's delicate muscle memory completely fails her, leaving her staring at a heavily butchered, totally unreadable piece of fabric. She glares at the ruined embroidery, heavily debating throwing it straight into the trash. The cat watches her struggle and, looking as though it completely understands the situation, nudges the messy necklace, clearly asking to wear it. The creature looks up at her with an expression that almost resembles a smile, melting her heart completely. She praises the cat for being an absolute angel, admitting that she was never allowed to keep pets in her past life, making this messy moment a genuine dream come true. Pulling it into a wholesome hug, she officially bestows the cat with the name Pudding. Later that evening, the wholesome vibe shifts dramatically. The maid from earlier stands by a desk, aggressively biting her nails. She is spiraling with anxiety, thinking about how a certain precious resource is being completely wasted by the estate when it could be used to cure her sick little brother. Out of nowhere, the three-eyed cat approaches her in the darkness. Speaking in a smooth, highly unsettling voice, Pudding offers to give her exactly what she desires, promising to explain exactly what she needs to do to get it. Outside in the garden, our girl enjoys the fresh air, completely unaware that Hannah is watching her from a window before hastily yanking the curtains shut. In reality, the mansion is currently running on a skeleton crew. Count Rowan's son had packed his bags and sprinted to his distant territory, terrified out of his wits because he kept hallucinating eyeballs staring at him from every corner. His departure looked less like a noble retreat and more like a frantic midnight escape with just a few hastily thrown together outfits. The absolute panic was contagious, as Daisy the maid had also pulled a disappearing act, straight up rejecting a glowing recommendation letter in favor of hiding out in a literal convent. With the cowards out of the picture, the empty mansion was left entirely in the elderly butler's care, whose sole responsibility is managing the terrifying entity wearing Evangeline's face. Hannah steps up to the plate, taking over Daisy's hazardous position simply because the hazard pay was astronomically high and she desperately needed the cash. She approaches the butler to deliver her daily report, confessing that she keeps hearing a phantom cat crying in the halls. She knows the estate supposedly exterminated all the felines, making the phantom meowing highly concerning. The butler looks at her with deep pity, clearly hearing absolutely nothing and assuming the poor maid's sanity has already expired. He gently offers to write her a recommendation letter so she can flee, but Hannah firmly refuses. She stubbornly insists she will keep working even if she goes completely deaf, claiming she can just read lips if it comes down to it. She has a sick younger sister relying on her, and she is fully prepared to endure any level of psychological torment to keep the paychecks coming. Accepting her sheer stubbornness, the butler hands Hannah a vial of highly expensive holy water, instructing her to feed it to the stray cat the monster insists on keeping. Staring at the glowing liquid, Hannah's brain short-circuits. She knows this exact holy water could instantly cure her bedridden sister. Her mind flashes back to the terrifying moment the three-eyed cat had cornered her, offering her a demonic bargain. When Pudding had casually offered her the holy water in exchange for a favor, Hannah had initially panicked, wondering if she should report the talking furball to the butler for a hefty cash reward. But realizing the sheer cost of medical bills, her desperation instantly overpowered her survival instincts. Following the monster cat's instructions to the letter, Hannah secretly swaps the real holy water for a useless fake. Unlike the fake Evangeline, who is completely immune to holy damage, the real holy water actually works perfectly on the cat, but Hannah expertly plays dumb. Because she successfully catered to the sinister feline, who drops the talking act in public to pretend to be a normal pet, the phantom crying completely stops tormenting her ears. Between the fat paycheck and the newly acquired holy water, Hannah treats herself to a massive grocery haul at the local market, buying premium treats for her family. The absolute highlight of her shady deal is watching her sick sister miraculously recover after drinking the stolen holy water. Compared to saving her sister's life, serving a creepy possessed lady and her demonic pet feels like a minor workplace inconvenience. She happily vows to be the best maid ever, completely ignoring the unsettling sight of our girl letting out creepy villain laughs while reading gloomy books with a three-eyed cat lounging on her head. Back in our girl's perspective, she is riding the absolute high of suddenly becoming an insanely overpowered transmigrator with the magical ability to read. Ready to fully exploit her new skills, she aggressively flips through the diary, hunting for a summoning spell so she can secure a pet dragon and go full-on overpowered mode. Instead of dark magic, she hits a wall of ancient romantic drama. Reading an entry from March of the year 370, she discovers the author met Count Rohan's son 20 years ago, making her realize this is actually Evangeline's mother's diary. She reads about the Count's proposal and the grandfather's furious refusal, citing that the Count is obviously just a gold digger after their ducal fortune. The diary details the Count aggressively defending his pure love, claiming he does not care about money. Our girl chuckles at the classic romance fantasy tropes, only to immediately burst out laughing when the very next year's entry features the mother violently regretting her marriage and begging to return home. Our girl brutally notes that the Count's undying love magically evaporated the exact second he swallowed the massive dowry. Losing interest in the tragic backstory, she speed reads through the pages, desperately hunting for summoning circles. She finally spots one, but her excitement flatlines when her magical translation patch suddenly crashes halfway through the text. She furiously squints at the absolute nonsense on the page, which instructs the reader to defile the earth with blood, draw a circle with a leaf and yarn, and wait for grapes to grow on a thorn bush. She mentally roasts the spell's terrible agricultural logic, questioning why anyone would expect grapes to grow on thorns. Deciding to table this frustrating project until her brain's translation software reboots, she plans to simply close the book. But her jaw practically unhinges when she realizes the literal piece of paper has physically vanished from the desk. Staring at the freshly vandalized diary, she crosses her arms and glares at Hannah, heavily questioning who exactly waltzed into her room yesterday. Hannah racks her brain and mentions a servant named Dan, noting it is highly suspicious that he completely ghosted his shift today. Our girl's blood instantly boils. Fuming over her stolen property, she aggressively vows to track Dan down and physically detach his head from his neck, fully prepared to abuse every single ounce of her aristocratic firing powers to get her revenge. Meanwhile, completely oblivious to his impending doom, Dan is currently hiding out in a rundown house. He is frantically painting the exact summoning circle from the stolen diary page on the floor. Unfortunately, the real, fully translated instructions do not involve grapes or yarn. Instead, they require defiling the earth with the martyrdom of a completely innocent soul. Adding a massive layer of absolute nightmare fuel to the situation, the innocent sacrifice Dan has kidnapped and tied up for his dark ritual is none other than Hannah's recently cured younger sister. The scene shifts to the absolute chaos of the town slums in the middle of the night. Drunkards are violently demanding more booze while beggars plead for spare coins, creating a thoroughly unhinged atmosphere. Two patrolling knights casually stroll through the mess, completely drained of their will to live and actively praying for their shift to end so they can finally relax. Their boredom is instantly shattered when they spot the incredibly wealthy Rohan-sun family carriage aggressively speeding through the slums, leaving them severely questioning reality. Our girl is currently sitting alongside Hannah and her chubby cat, absolutely seething with rage. She grinds her teeth, fiercely vowing to rip her stolen spell back from the thief so she can properly start her overpowered fantasy adventure. The perspective shifts to the rundown shack, where Hannah's kidnapped younger sister is currently crying her eyes out and wondering how her life went so incredibly wrong. She remembers simply waiting for Hannah in broad daylight, fully intending to give a snack to a passing stray cat. Instead, the creepy thief swooped in and abducted her, flashing a highly disturbing smile and declaring it was finally time to offer up a sacrifice. The poor girl looks at her captor like he just suggested eating soup with a fork, deeply convinced he has completely lost his mind. The thief aggressively defends his sanity, boasting that his eye for the supernatural is absolutely flawless. He lays out his bulletproof logic, pointing out that Evangeline literally returned to life after hanging herself, meaning she is absolutely possessed by a demon. He smugly notes that while the other idiots in the mansion panicked and cowered before a little girl, he saw a golden opportunity. He launches into a massive villain monologue, explaining that Count Rohan-sun is just a money-grabbing rat who relies on his sickly daughter for a massive allowance from her ducal family. The thief assumes the Count made a demonic contract to resurrect his cash cow the moment she died. Fuming with resentment, he recalls getting beaten to a pulp by the Count just for discovering some dizzying spells hidden away in the office documents. Declaring his grand ambition to become a far more respectable noble than his former boss, the thief prepares his weapon. He enthusiastically recites the dark incantation, speaking about defiling the earth with the martyrdom of an innocent to draw the summoning circle. He firmly tells the terrified sister to stop acting like a baby, claiming he just needs a tiny scratch to give the demon a little taste of blood. He drags the blade against her neck, leaving a fresh mark. Losing his place in the script, he awkwardly tries to remember the rest of the ridiculous spell, chanting absolute nonsense about grapes ripening on thorn bushes and figs growing from thistles. Reaching the grand finale, he passionately welcomes the Angel of Light to return to the earth. Right on cue, the absolute Angel of Darkness arrives. With a massive crash that sounds like a literal trumpet blast, the shack door flies open. Revealing our girl standing there with glowing red eyes, looking like a highly aesthetic sleep paralysis demon. In reality, our girl is internally having a massive heart attack because the ridiculously loud noise scared her half to death. She realizes she kicked the flimsy, ancient doorway too hard out of pure anger and instantly regrets her dramatic entrance. Recovering her posture, she immediately assesses the situation and mentally screams, wondering when the petty thief magically leveled up into a full-blown kidnapper. Hearing Hannah suddenly scream for her sister from behind her, our girl realizes this absolute loser laid his hands on the family of her one and only work friend. Her knuckles crack as she vows to absolutely destroy him, but she knows she needs to secure the hostage first. The thief trembles aggressively, backing away as he stammers Evangeline's name in pure terror. Our girl assumes he is just sweating profusely because he got caught red-handed. Putting on her best villainous performance, she smoothly asks if he called for her and if he is enjoying her personal summoning circle. He looks at her in utter shock, horrified to realize she is the original owner of the demonic circle. Our girl purposefully keeps his attention entirely on her, dramatically claiming she came all this way just to grant him a single wish, fully intending to absolutely ghost him on this promise later. The thief takes the bait immediately, aggressively demanding to be made so insanely rich he can live in pure luxury for the rest of his life. Our girl mentally rolls her eyes, figuring kidnappers are always painfully predictable when it comes to ransom money. Her confidence immediately evaporates when she realizes she forgot to bring a single coin with her. Winging it entirely, she offers him the ultimate promotion, proposing to make him the next Count Rohan's son by marrying him into the family as a son-in-law. She flashes a confident smirk, secretly planning to beat him into a permanent coma the second the little girl is safe. The thief goes completely silent, staring at her with dead serious intensity. Our girl starts sweating, worrying she completely overplayed her hand with the fake marriage proposal. However, he actually loves the idea, grinning as he declares that stealing the Count's position sounds like an absolute dream. Ready to seal the deal right then and there, he enthusiastically raises his knife and prepares to strike the little girl, completely misunderstanding the vibe and assuming the blood sacrifice is legally required to close their new contract. Our girl does not wait for the thief to finish his sentence. Instead of engaging in a drawn-out dramatic confrontation, she channels all her rage into a single, brutal punch, sending the guy straight into the floorboards. Staring at his unconscious body, she mildly questions her own combat logic, wondering if she should have struck the back of his neck like they do in the movies instead of aiming directly for the face. She worries he might suddenly wake up and fight back, but after seeing him absolutely motionless, she figures she got lucky and landed the perfect critical hit. With the threat temporarily neutralized, Hannah immediately rushes toward Kana, crying out her name in pure desperation. Trembling violently, she frantically tries to untie the ropes binding her sister's hands but completely fails. Her hands are shaking so badly that the knot absolutely refuses to budge. Standing behind her, our girl watches the struggle and gently takes over. She notes that trying to untie a complex knot with violently shaking hands is an impossible task, smoothly loosening the ropes and finally declaring Kana free. Hannah immediately scoops her little sister into a massive, tearful hug, scolding her for wandering outside right after recovering from her illness. Kana cries, apologizing profusely and explaining she was just trying to wait for Hannah, never expecting to get snatched up by a creep like him. Hannah tightens her embrace, telling Kana not to be sorry and expressing her immense relief that she is finally safe. Standing awkwardly to the side, our girl watches the emotionally charged reunion, feeling a massive wave of wholesome relief wash over her. She silently notes that rescuing people actually feels incredibly rewarding. She briefly considers jumping into the group hug but quickly realizes it would completely shatter her fearsome, villainous reputation. Deciding to stay in character, she asks Kana what they should do with the unconscious thief. She casually suggests locking him in the underground dungeon, forever to rot. Before making any concrete plans, she notices the fresh scratch on the girl's neck and immediately asks if she is okay. Kana softly replies that she is completely fine. Suddenly, the absolute worst-case scenario unfolds. The thief jolts awake, violently grabs his knife, and screams out for Evangeline. Before our girl can even react to the incoming threat, the man violently plunges the knife straight into his own neck, collapsing back to the floor in a fresh pool of blood. Our girl stares at the ceiling in complete and utter disbelief. She mentally screams, totally baffled as to why the thief just aggressively chose the self-checkout lane out of nowhere. She assumes he simply could not handle the thought of paying for his crimes, mildly frustrated that he robbed her of the chance to dish out proper righteous punishment. Faking a villainous nonchalance, she simply says, "Oops, he went and died on me." Kana looks up at her with pure admiration, smiling warmly as she declares that her rescue is more than enough and thanks her profusely for saving her life. Our girl mentally pats herself on the back, deciding that playing the hero is actually a fantastic experience. She feels so much heartwarming emotion welling up inside her that the room literally feels like it is getting hotter. She is totally absorbed in the glowing, wholesome moment until Hannah violently shatters the illusion, screaming that the building is literally on fire and they need to evacuate immediately. Snapping back to reality, our girl realizes the sparkling, romantic effect she thought she was experiencing was actually the reflection of a massive, uncontained house fire. She stares at the flames in absolute confusion, noting the fireplace is completely unlit and there is zero logical reason for the shack to spontaneously combust. Her eyes dart toward the summoning circle smeared on the floor, and a devastating realization hits her like a truck. She figures that absolute jerk actually managed to correctly activate her spell and accidentally summoned a literal fire spirit. She mentally curses the universe, remembering how she had to draw the spell on the floor using a splinter just to bleed for the ritual, only for nothing to happen because her magical translation software crashed. And now, the one spell that could have secured her overpowered fantasy life is literally burning to ashes right in front of her. She heavily sighs, fully accepting that she must officially surrender her dreams of becoming an overpowered transmigrator. The perspective shifts to the dark reality of Kana's past. Her entire world used to be confined to a single, rusted room that smelled heavily of mold and cold soup. Her life was bound to a narrow, rock-hard bed and a tiny window barely the size of two handspans. Having been incredibly frail since birth, she was a constant burden on her family. Her difficult delivery took her mother's life, and her father literally worked himself to death trying to pay for her endless treatments. The crushing financial and emotional burden eventually fell entirely on Hannah. Despite consuming an endless supply of expensive medicine, Kana never got better. She deeply wished Hannah would just give up and admit it was entirely hopeless. Kana was desperate to finally let go and stop clinging to her miserable, pathetic excuse for a life. But Hannah stubbornly labeled that desperate clinging as hope. Hannah would point to the tiny window, promising Kana that one day she would be able to walk outside with the other people. That tiny two-span window became Kana's entire universe, allowing her to mentally project herself into the outside world and hold on to the hope her sister fiercely defended. One day, a brand new figure appeared in that window. Shortly after, an absolute miracle arrived in the form of a stolen bottle of holy water. Hannah presented it to her, claiming a kind noble had heard her tragic story and donated the cure, promising she never had to be sick again. Kana's immediate reaction was not joy, but pure, unfiltered anger. She was absolutely furious that her family had sacrificed their entire lives, drained their finances, and worked themselves to death just for a single tiny bottle of water to instantly fix everything. Having nowhere else to direct her massive resentment, she focused all her anger onto the very person who had seemingly saved her, the mysterious Lady Evangeline. But when that same woman violently kicked down the door of the shack, glowing with power and ready to rescue her from a literal sacrifice, Kana's perspective shattered entirely. The person she had foolishly deeply resented proved that she truly deserved to be called an absolute angel, bringing Kana salvation for the second time. Returning to Kana's perspective in the present moment, she remembers looking up at Evangeline. When Evangeline casually offered to throw the thief in the dungeon and checked on her injured neck, Kana had simply stated she was fine. When the thief suddenly took his own life and Evangeline played it off with a casual oops, Kana had genuinely meant it when she said her rescue was more than enough. In truth, Kana knew exactly what had happened. Suicide is considered an absolute, unforgivable sin, and those who throw away their God-given lives are granted zero mercy. There is only one destination for a soul that commits such an act. The flames that suddenly engulfed the room were not a random accident or a summoned fire spirit. The literal fires of hell had manifested to personally drag the thief's soul into the abyss. And to Kana, sitting safely in Evangeline's presence, that terrifying, supernatural heat felt as warm and comforting as her own sister's embrace. Outside the shack, a patrolling knight finally spots the massive blaze, shouting the alarm into the night sky. As the shack burns to a crisp, our girl stands back and watches the flames turn into a full-blown neighborhood fire show. The crowd parts when a squad of patrol knights arrives to secure the area. They sport uniforms so ridiculously flashy they look like they belong on a high-fashion runway instead of the slums. The flashiest of them all head straight for her. He is so aggressively handsome that our girl instantly starts hallucinating fake childhood memories, vividly imagining a bizarre scenario where a teacher called him out in class just to confirm he was not an actual Greek statue. He introduces himself as Gabriel, the commander of the knights. Our girl mentally checks off her romance fantasy tropes. Since the local crown prince is a middle-aged dad and the brooding Duke of the North is completely non-existent, this man's striking black hair and flawless face absolutely scream male lead material. The commander politely asks why a noble lady is taking a midnight stroll through the absolute worst part of town. Our girl mentally groans, feeling like she is getting the standard villainous interrogation treatment right off the bat. Before she can even formulate an excuse, Kana boldly steps up, throwing herself between the towering knight and our girl. The brave little redhead snaps at the commander, telling him to stop interrogating her savior. Deeply touched by the fierce loyalty, our girl gently tries to take the reins. She casually explains she was simply hunting down a rogue servant who is currently burning to a crisp inside the house, heavily implying he was absolute garbage and totally deserved his fiery eviction from life. The commander stares at her, politely asking for a bit more detail for his official paperwork. Our girl starts sweating profusely, knowing she cannot exactly put demonic fire spirit summonings on a police report. Thankfully, Kana jumps in again, delivering a perfectly logical summary of her kidnapping and rescue, firmly stating the thief must be dead inside. Our girl notes that the commander buys the incredibly normal explanation instantly. Suddenly, the puzzle pieces click together in her brain. A brooding, black-haired knight plus a brave, fiery red-haired girl equals the ultimate romance novel pairing. She realizes Kana is the absolute female lead of this universe. Panic sets in as she figures the original plot demanded the dashing knight swoop in to save the hostage. By breaking down the door herself, she just violently derailed their fated first meeting. She briefly debates if she should have stayed out of it to preserve the storyline, but immediately trashes the thought, knowing she could never just sit back and let a child get sacrificed for the sake of plot progression. Kana completely shatters the romantic tension, brutally shutting down the conversation by coldly informing the handsome knight that her lady is tired and they are leaving. Our girl internally screams, realizing the heroine is now actively icing out her fated lover, all because of her interference. Fully accepting her new role as the ultimate plot-wrecking villainess, she formally invites the commander to visit House Rohan-san if he needs to clear up any problems, before making her grand exit. As she walks away, the commander stares after her with deep, unsettling suspicion. From his perspective, their interaction was nothing short of a horror movie. At first glance, he genuinely thought she was a delicate marble statue left in the slums, utterly devoid of anything resembling human life. He had been so violently stunned when her blood-red eyes and mouth actually moved that he almost lost his voice. To him, she looked at the surrounding humans with the icy detachment of someone watching ants. He also noted that Kana's blind, fearless devotion to this chilling entity felt less like gratitude and more like the fanaticism of a brainwashed cult member. His disturbing thoughts are interrupted when a subordinate rushes over with a bizarre report. The raging fire had miraculously put itself out, refusing to spread a single inch beyond the targeted shack. Leading his commander into the ruins, the knight points to the thief's remains. Instead of a normal burnt corpse, they find an intact skeleton made entirely of ash, bizarrely shaped with a pair of massive wings spread across the ground, looking eerily like a fallen angel. The ash wings look so fragile they might crumble before ever managing a single flap. Meanwhile, the bizarre sight echoes beyond the slums. An unseen artist feels a sudden, overwhelming calling. Gripped by a manic inspiration, they frantically declare they absolutely must finish drawing this holy angel, obsessively sketching a figure with a flickering halo over its head. The perspective shifts to a struggling artist whose career took a massive nosedive because the local nobles had terrible taste. Now functioning as a full-time parasite living off his wife, he desperately needed to produce a masterpiece to pay the bills. Wandering the slums for a crumb of inspiration, he stumbled upon the aftermath of the magical fire right before the knights arrived to secure the scene. Staring at the charred, pitch-black skeleton resting in the ashes, his brain immediately categorized it as a holy angel. Gripped by a manic calling, he sprinted straight home to paint his new muse. Realizing regular paint was completely failing to capture the terrifying aesthetic, he casually grabbed a scalpel, perfectly willing to finish his masterpiece using his own blood while completely ignoring all standard health and safety protocols. Meanwhile, back in the Rohan-san family carriage, our girl casually asks Kana if she wants to crash at the mansion, noting that returning to her burnt-down house would be deeply traumatizing. Hana completely panics internally. She desperately wants to refuse the offer but is absolutely terrified of angering the lady, vividly remembering the thief's spontaneous, fiery demise and Kana's deeply unsettling satisfaction with the whole ordeal. Completely ignoring her older sister's internal crisis, Kana enthusiastically asks if Hana can move in too. Our girl immediately approves, prompting Kana to excitedly claim she wants to pick their new room herself. Hana watches her sister chatter away, sweating profusely over how entirely fearless the kid is around their resident sleep paralysis demon. Hana's anxiety spikes even further, realizing that if the elderly butler spots Kana happily skipping around the estate, he will instantly figure out she stole the outrageously expensive holy water. Kana boldly requests the room directly below our girl's suite. Hana weakly points out that the room belonged to the late countess, but our girl waves the concern off entirely. She brutally notes the woman is dead anyway. The furniture is already there, and she will simply inform her absentee father about the new living arrangements. Hana mentally prepares for their inevitable eviction, deciding their best survival strategy is to simply treat the butler like a T-Rex and avoid his line of sight completely. Later that night, the two sisters are tucked safely into a massive, luxurious bed. Kana happily mentions she can hear the lady walking around upstairs, though Hana hears absolutely nothing but her own raging anxiety. Kana raves about the giant bed and excitedly mentions crossing paths with the lady's adorable cat earlier, calling their meeting pure fate. Hana stares at the ceiling, mentally screaming that the adorable cat is a literal demonic entity, but she firmly decides to keep that horrifying trivia to herself. Kana finally drops her brave act, tightly hugging Hana and tearfully thanking her for the rescue, admitting she was absolutely terrified. Hana squeezes her sister's hand, feeling a massive wave of guilt for temporarily thinking Kana was acting like a brainwashed cultist earlier. At the end of the day, Kana is just her precious, beloved little sister. Up in her room, our girl is busy drafting her ultimate survival manifesto. Her brand new primary objective is to aggressively befriend Kana. She notes that a standard villainess would usually try to seduce the male lead, but despite his aggressively handsome face, she feels absolutely zero romantic spark. She realizes he is just words on a page to her, mildly questioning if rejecting the hot knight officially disqualifies her from the romance fantasy genre. Deciding not to care, she firmly dumps all her survival points into the female lead instead, securing the ultimate shortcut to escape her villainous doom flags. To ensure the sisters can officially keep the Countess's old room, she needs to secure permission from the Count. Knowing her father absolutely despises her and is currently hiding out on a fake business trip, she formulates a toxic but highly effective plan. Step 1 requires ripping out a page from her late mother's diary that is absolutely loaded with vicious curses directed at the Count. Step 2 is simply folding it neatly and mailing it along with her room request. Step 3 is receiving his highly predictable, terrified reply, where he tells her to do whatever she wants as long as she never contacts him again and only speaks to the butler. She mentally pats herself on the back, thrilled to have successfully secured the heroine and her trusty sidekick. The next day, our girl is casually sipping tea with Hana and Kana, feeling like an absolute tactical genius. Her heart is practically sweating with joy as she mentally celebrates the start of her completely relaxed, villainous escape lifestyle. Her peaceful daydream is violently shattered when Commander Gabriel suddenly enters the scene. The ridiculously handsome knight regretfully informs her that people might accuse her of disgracefully manipulating the thief's death. Our girl's jaw practically unhinges. Her dreams of a peaceful retirement instantly evaporate, leaving her staring at the knight and heavily questioning what kind of absolute nightmare plot twist she just walked into. Rewinding slightly to right before the devastating news drop, Hana approaches our girl with a letter from the handsome commander. He is officially requesting a visit to discuss a sudden problem with the thief's case. Kana is immediately irritated, fiercely questioning why the knight is bothering her lady after they had already provided their official statements. Our girl mentally chuckles, assuming the commander is just using the investigation as a flimsy excuse to get some FaceTime with his fated heroine Kana. Fully prepared to play the ultimate wingman, our girl decides to casually show off her close bond with Kana during the meeting to clearly signal her support for their budding romance. Hoping this matchmaking effort will earn her a quiet, safe spot in the background of their eventual happy ending, she excitedly asks Hana for some premium stationery to write her reply. The scene shifts to our girl and Gabriel sitting down for a wildly uncomfortable tea time. After exchanging basic pleasantries, Gabriel politely asks if Kana is doing well, noting she did not seem badly hurt during the rescue. Our girl mentally roars in frustration, heavily questioning his male lead observation skills. She completely disagrees, internally wailing about the nasty scar left on Kana's neck. She and Hana had fully intended to use holy water to erase it entirely, but Kana stubbornly insisted on keeping the mark as a reminder, leaving the older girls to cry internally every time they are forced to look at it. Gabriel then drops the absolute bomb. He explains that if they do not handle this situation properly, the public will accuse her of disgracefully manipulating the thief's death. Our girl is completely baffled by this bizarre plot twist. To help explain the absolute madness, Gabriel slides a piece of paper across the table. Our girl stares at the page, and her brain completely short-circuits. It is quite possibly the worst sketch she has ever seen, looking less like official police evidence and more like a kindergartner's failed doodle. Gabriel awkwardly apologizes for his tragic art skills, admitting he drew it himself. Our girl stares at his flawlessly sculpted face, totally bewildered that someone so aesthetically perfect could be so artistically challenged, figuring the universe had to aggressively balance his stats somehow. Gabriel earnestly asks if the messy sketch almost looks like an angel. Our girl bites her tongue to stop herself from laughing, firmly deciding the chaotic scribbles look exactly like a moth. Ignoring the terrible art, Gabriel explains the grim reality. When the public saw the ash skeleton arranged like an angel, ridiculous rumors started spreading that the kidnapper had actually received a divine blessing before dying. To make matters infinitely worse, a local artist painted a massive, overly dramatic rendition of the scene and donated it to the temple. Now, the temple is practically treating the dead thief like a holy figure, demanding a full reinvestigation. Gabriel warns that if the temple officially declares the kidnapper was blessed, all the blame will violently shift onto our girl, framing her as a dishonorable villain who manipulated a holy event to cover her tracks. Our girl starts sweating profusely, realizing the universe is aggressively trying to force her down the villainous doom route. Gabriel leans in, intensely asking if she told him the absolute truth about that night. Our girl panics, knowing that if she changes her story now, she will look incredibly guilty. Plus, she knows explaining elemental spirits to these people will just make her sound completely insane. Deflecting like a pro, She simply asks if he honestly thinks she lied. Gabriel immediately denies thinking the thief was blessed, stating he simply finds the death highly suspicious and genuinely wants to help her. Our girl is violently taken aback. She spots his slightly embarrassed expression and immediately recognizes the terrifying signs of a romance fantasy trope locking onto its target. Realizing her brilliant plan to avoid the villainous route accidentally triggered a romance flag with the male lead, she mentally scolds herself for underestimating the genre. Deciding to aggressively squash this plotline, she stares at him with a deadpan expression and bluntly states that she is absolutely not interested in him. Gabriel completely brushes off the brutal rejection. He smoothly counters that he already figured out she has zero interest in regular people, but he simply finds her utterly fascinating. Our girl internally screams, begging the universe to stop with the dramatic close-ups and invisible floating flower petals. She heavily questions if this man has literal sugar water running through his veins instead of blood, absolutely terrified by the sheer, unyielding force of romance novel dialogue. Desperate to derail the romantic tension, she points back to his tragic moth drawing. She pivots back to the case, explaining that the real reason she chased the kidnapper was because he stole a specific painting from her before taking Kana hostage. She taps the circular scribbles on Gabriel's terrible sketch. Gabriel practically begs to know what the pattern means. She casually admits it is a summoning circle. When he presses to know exactly what it summons, she mentally shrugs. Knowing these people only believe in the Lord and not magical spirits, she decides to just feed them what they want to hear, casually guessing it summons an angel. The moment the word leaves her mouth, an absolute, crushing silence falls over the room. It is as if the entire world holds its breath. From Gabriel's perspective, the metaphorical birds drop from the sky, flowers violently close their petals in fear, and the grand orchestra of reality goes completely mute. Her earlier, brutal rejection suddenly makes perfect, terrifying sense to him. He completely agrees that a being like her should have absolutely no interest in him. In his eyes, she is not just a noble lady. She is an incomprehensible, majestic entity, like a god or a demon, viewing all of humanity as nothing more than a swarm of insignificant ants. He feels that if she crushed them all, it would simply be an act of nature. Gabriel considers it an absolute miracle that he managed to draw any emotion out of her at all, feeling as though he just witnessed a delicate flower spontaneously blooming on a dead, frozen winter tree. Later, as Gabriel and his squad leave the estate, a pink-haired subordinate points out an exceptionally massive cherry blossom tree on the grounds, marveling at its unnatural, towering size. Gabriel looks up at the sprawling branches. For a split second, a horrifying hallucination flashes before his eyes, and he clearly sees the pale figure of Evangeline swinging from a branch. He violently blinks, and the corpse vanishes, leaving him deeply unsettled and wondering if it was just a sinister trick of the drooping petals. The scene shifts back to Commander Gabriel, who is currently brooding in his carriage and looking deeply disturbed. He decides that hallucinating Evangeline swinging from a cherry blossom tree was absolutely 0% funny. He mentally reviews the case files he gathered before visiting the Rohan-sun estate, focusing on the priest who originally claimed to have witnessed Evangeline rise from the dead. In a massive plot twist, the temple actually had zero records of Evangeline's funeral. Instead, the priest who supposedly conducted the service was the one who ended up hanging himself. Leaving no suicide note behind, an audit revealed the late priest had been secretly extorting the grieving families of suicide victims and aggressively padding his own pockets with their cash. The general public simply labeled his sudden death as a brutal dose of instant divine karma. The pink-haired subordinate, Raphael, breaks the heavy silence by holding up a charred scrap of paper salvaged from the crime scene. He reads the only surviving sentence, which dramatically demands the reader to revere and welcome the angel of light back to the earth. Gabriel's brain instantly connects the dots, flashing back to Evangeline deadpanning that her circle summoned an angel. Realizing the magical circle is their only solid lead, Gabriel wonders if it is an ancient wish-granting ritual. He turns to Raphael, asking if he knows anything about old-school magic rituals. Before Raphael can even answer, the carriage violently jolts, nearly launching them out of their seats. Raphael hops out and aggressively scolds the driver for his terrible steering. The terrified driver apologizes, explaining that a stray cat suddenly launched itself directly into their path. A quick glimpse reveals the culprit is actually our girl's chubby, multi-eyed feline menace, completely unfazed by the near-death experience. As the driver desperately tries to calm the panicked horses, Gabriel stares out the window. His paranoia spikes to maximum capacity, heavily questioning if nearly getting into a massive traffic accident the exact second they brought up dark magic was just a convenient coincidence. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to a peaceful convent, where a group of nuns are currently scrubbing floors and aggressively spilling tea. They are gossiping about a highly controversial new holy painting hanging in the central temple. It is currently functioning as a spiritual lie detector for fake believers, with one noble lady supposedly fainting dead away in front of it and waking up claiming she had a personal vision of the sun god. The painting is causing a massive public uproar. A knight named Mikkel is practically glued to the canvas, and the high priest even showered the artist with an astronomically fat stack of cash as a grand donation. The nuns excitedly declare they desperately want to see this absolute masterpiece for themselves. The gossip abruptly pauses when Daisy, Evangeline's highly traumatized former maid, shuffles past carrying an incredibly gloomy aura. A nun asks where she is going, and Daisy nervously explains that Father Berger requested her presence. The nuns immediately hit the panic button, loudly warning Daisy that the priest is a notorious creep who aggressively targets fresh arrivals. Deeply grateful for the heads-up, Daisy immediately changes her entire route. Having barely survived her terrifying employment under the monster wearing Evangeline's face, her tolerance for danger is completely maxed out. She decides to barricade herself in the library until dawn, hoping to completely dodge the creepy priest and avoid getting dragged into any more horror movie scenarios. Unfortunately, her stealth mission completely fails the second she steps outside. She is instantly ambushed by two highly suspicious men. They bluntly confess that Father Berger never actually summoned her. Instead, they took it upon themselves to kidnap her, hoping that offering up a woman will somehow magically cure the priest's mysterious illness. They violently shove Daisy to the dirt, casually promising she can leave once the priest is feeling better. Sprawled on the ground, Daisy looks up and completely freezes in pure terror. Crawling nearby like an absolute creep is an unhinged man frantically smearing black paint across the floor with his bare hands. He aggressively mutters to himself about finding the right spot and absolutely needing to complete the hidden part of his drawing, leaving Daisy feeling like she just stumbled straight back into a nightmare. The second Daisy recognizes the demonic geometry of the summoning circle, her brain violently flashes back to the terrifying multi-eyed monster she escaped at the Rohan-sun estate. Her survival instincts kick into maximum overdrive. Deciding she would much rather commit a felony than let that nightmare entity fully cross over, she grabs a nearby statue and aggressively smashes it directly over the creepy priest's head. Out in the hallway, the two kidnappers hear the massive thud but completely ignore it, casually assuming it is just the usual chaotic aftermath of throwing a woman into the priest's room. Back inside, Daisy's adrenaline violently crashes, leaving her staring at the lifeless body in absolute horror. She mentally screams, realizing she just accidentally murdered a priest, which is considered a massive, unforgivable sin that guarantees a swift and brutal execution. Trapped in a literal nightmare with absolutely nowhere to run, she desperately wishes for anyone to save her. The universe immediately answers her desperate plea. A ghostly male figure materializes above her, casually shushing her panicked screams. He promises to let her go as long as she keeps her mouth shut. Daisy stares at the apparition, severely questioning if he is even human. The ghost casually explains he only showed up because he caught a very specific scent, asking if she knows an entity covered in eyes known as flowers. Daisy's blood runs cold as she realizes he is talking about the monster currently wearing her former lady's face. The ghost enthusiastically demands she take him straight to this target. When Daisy tries to argue, the ghost shuts her down, pointing out that she already made a wish for help. Since he dragged himself all the way over here for a bargain price, he insists she owes him a massive favor to make it worth his time. With a casual flick of his spectral finger, the ghost reanimates the dead priest, forcing the bloody corpse to stand right back up. The ghost brutally critiques the priest's body, calling it a tasteless sacrifice that only a starving entity would bother consuming. Deciding to throw in some complimentary customer service, he turns his attention to the two guards outside. Using his ghostly powers, he casually slices off both their heads and hilariously swaps them onto each other's bodies. The ghost bursts into a fit of maniacal laughter, absolutely thrilled with his horrific arts and crafts project, while Daisy is permanently reduced to a trembling puddle on the floor. The scene jumps to the exterior of the Rohan-sun estate. Daisy points to the mansion, confirming that the entity he is looking for is inside. The ghost inhales deeply, noting that the monster's scent is absolutely everywhere. As the ghost phases away to handle his business, Daisy is left completely speechless, staring blankly at the massive cherry blossom tree in the yard. She shudders, noting that the tree has not lost a single petal since the original Evangeline hanged herself from its branches. Her absolute trauma conga line continues when a carriage slowly rolls up to her. The driver leans down to ask where she wants to go, casually revealing that his neck is completely sliced open. Like a broken record, the undead driver repeatedly asks for her destination until a deeply traumatized Daisy mechanically tells him to take her to the temple. Meanwhile, completely oblivious to the incoming ghost invasion, our girl is currently staring at the ground in absolute confusion. She spots a strange little dog completely covered in bizarre blue and purple scratches. When the battered creature actually opens its mouth and desperately begs her for help, her brain completely short-circuits. Staring at the talking canine, she heavily questions her fantasy genre knowledge, wondering if she just accidentally adopted a tiny, heavily bruised werewolf. Back inside our girl's bedroom, her three-eyed cat is currently enjoying a peaceful nap. The tranquility is violently shattered when the ghost from the convent phases into the room, immediately taunting the sleeping feline. Calling the cat flowers, The ghost ruthlessly mocks him for hitting absolute rock bottom by playing the role of a pathetic house pet. Taking massive offense to the insult, the cat immediately drops the adorable act, violently transforming into a massive, terrifying monster and lunging straight for the spectral intruder. Meanwhile, completely unaware of the absolute monster mash happening in her bedroom, our girl is currently staring at the battered, talking dog she just found outside. Assuming it is actually a werewolf, her romance fantasy radar goes off, instantly categorizing this injured stray as the classic second male lead. She mentally maps out the entire cliché plotline where the bullied heroine, Kana, sneaks into the garden to cry, discovers the wounded beast, and gently treats his injuries. After a mountain of accidental physical contact, the beast magically transforms into a ridiculously handsome guy, aggressively flirts with the heroine, and rolls the credits. Thrilled by the sheer romantic potential of this flawless trope, she decides she needs to grab Kana immediately to trigger their fated encounter. However, the injured wolf completely ruins her matchmaking plans by hitting her with the ultimate puppy dog eyes, desperately begging her to save him right then and there. She complains that she cannot possibly drag a massive wolf inside all by herself, but before she can even blink, they are both magically teleported straight into her bedroom. Our girl is absolutely baffled, realizing that beast folk in this universe apparently come equipped with instant teleportation magic. Unable to ignore his desperate pleas, she decides to administer some first aid, but quickly complains that his thick fur is completely blocking her view of his injuries. Obliging her request, the creature drops his wolf disguise and shifts back into his original humanoid form. Our girl is absolutely stunned to find the ghostly man bleeding profusely on her floor, heavily questioning if she should just call a doctor for a wound that massive. Right on cue, putting the cat trots into the room carrying a fresh vial of holy water. Our girl's heart absolutely melts. She notes that while other normal pets bring home dead roaches, her absolute genius of a baby brings home premium medical supplies. She showers the cat with praise and aggressive head pats. She briefly questions if her multi-eyed feline is also a magical beast folk in disguise, considering its suspicious intelligence, but completely ignores the massive red flags to focus entirely on her dying patient. She turns around and is deeply confused to find the ghost desperately cowering in the far corner of the room. Assuming he is just overwhelmed by the physical pain, she grabs the holy water and orders him to drink up. When he hesitates, she forcefully chugs the glowing liquid straight down his throat, lecturing him about being a picky eater when he is literally bleeding out and telling him to just push through the bad taste. Suddenly, the ghost collapses to the floor, violently convulsing before passing out completely. Completely oblivious to the fact that she just effectively poisoned a demonic entity with highly concentrated holy water, she assumes he simply fell asleep from exhaustion. Noting he refused to give his real name while on the run, she officially dubs him Jelly in honor of his adorable wolf paw pads. Later that night, the absolute horror movie atmosphere at the Rohan-sun estate kicks into high gear. The night shift attendants are required to extinguish the lights across the entire mansion. An unfortunate maid named Olive draws the short straw and is assigned to the terrifying 4th floor. Her co-workers had sworn that Lady Evangeline never left her room and the floor was perfectly safe, but Olive heavily questions their sanity as painful. Echoing groans fill the dark hallway. Relying entirely on her flickering lantern, she nervously creeps forward, her panic skyrocketing as the terrifying sounds grow closer, and she suddenly spots a massive pool of fresh blood smeared across the floorboards. Terrified out of her mind, she stumbles backward and nearly plummets down a flight of stairs, but Kana suddenly appears out of the shadows and catches her just in time. Kana gently warns her to be careful of the steps and advises her to head inside since the night is dangerous. Olive thanks the girl profusely and hurries downstairs, where an exhausted coworker is waiting to collect her lantern. The coworker complains that Olive is the absolute last person to finish her shift, but Olive corrects her, stating that Kana has not finished her rounds upstairs yet. The coworker looks at her like she has completely lost her mind, chillingly stating that absolutely no one named Kana is on tonight's night roster. In reality, the terrifying truth of the estate is that among the entities roaming the dark halls of the Rohan-sun mansion, the ones that are not actually human never bother to carry a lantern. Back in our girl's bedroom, the ghost she force-fed earlier jolts awake, violently hacking up the holy water. He internally screams that the pain is absolutely agonizing, feeling like he is literally burning at the stake all from a single dose of blessed tap water. Glancing at our girl sleeping peacefully on the bed, he realizes that under normal circumstances, a mere flick of his power should have easily blocked the liquid. But he completely failed to break her iron grip. His absolute survival instincts had aggressively screamed at him to stay perfectly still and submit to her demands. He concludes that making a terrifying entity like flowers fawn over her like a harmless house cat is impossible for a mere mortal, firmly deciding that whatever is piloting Evangeline's body is either a literal god or something utterly incomprehensible. The three-eyed cat drops the feline act entirely, transforming into a little boy. He smugly warns the ghost to keep his voice down and not wake Lady Evangeline, sarcastically asking if he is hoping for a second serving of holy water. The ghost furiously snaps back, blaming the cat for bringing the toxic liquid in the first place. Their aggressive bickering is suddenly interrupted by Kana popping her head into the room. She boldly scolds the bleeding ghost, complaining that he is being way too loud and completely terrifying her older sister downstairs. The ghost stares at her in absolute disbelief, feeling incredibly victimized and realizing he is somehow being treated like a criminal just for loudly suffering in agonizing pain. The next morning, our girl wakes up feeling like she got hit by a truck, assuming she is suffering from severe sleep paralysis. She groggily stares at the ghost and the cat looming over her bed, heavily questioning why a standard romance fantasy novel suddenly features an entire cast of paranormal roommates. Snuggling her chubby cat for comfort, she notes his warmth is the only thing making this bizarre reality feel grounded. She briefly spirals into an existential crisis, realizing this world is technically just made of words on a page, but quickly shuts those depressing thoughts down to avoid getting homesick. The injured wolf formally asks if she slept well. Refusing to share her personal space with a grown man, she immediately orders him off the mattress. The wolf aggressively protests the blatant favoritism, brutally exposing the cat by revealing he is also just a guy pretending to be a helpless pet. Our girl's brain completely short-circuits. Horrified, she frantically mentally reviews every single embarrassing thing she has done in front of the cat so far. Sensing his cushy lifestyle is in critical danger, Pudding instantly transforms into an incredibly adorable little boy, deploying maximum puppy dog eyes and tearfully asking if she hates him now. Our girl's soul practically leaves her body in pure relief, aggressively thanking the universe that her pet is just a child and not a fully grown adult man. She instantly rationalizes the situation, figuring it is actually perfect that the two magical beast folk have each other. She morbidly notes that since she possessed this body without warning, she could vanish just as easily, so she is deeply glad her baby will not be left completely alone. Plunking the adorable kid right onto her head, she firmly declares she could never hate her precious Pudding. Safe on his throne, the kid flashes a highly toxic, smug grin at the wolf. The wolf completely loses his mind, furiously demanding the kid get off her head, while our girl desperately tries to mediate the chaotic nursery. The absolute circus is interrupted when Kana and Hana walk into the room. Bouncing with energy, Kana eagerly asks if there are any chores for her to do today. Not wanting to trigger any evil villainous flags by employing child labor, our girl attempts to gently decline. But Kana stubbornly insists, proudly showing off a heavily embroidered name tag she made just to repay her lady's kindness. Finding the gesture incredibly sweet, our girl caves. She decides to send Kana to check on the dashing commander, wanting to see if he is actually handling the thief's investigation properly without blowing her cover. To secure maximum affection points with the heroine, our girl casually hands Kana an absolute boulder of a coin pouch for errand and snack money. Kana and Hana stare at the ridiculous amount of wealth in utter shock, noting that the supposed pocket money could easily purchase a luxury mansion outright. Smiling like a proud billionaire aunt, our girl tells them it is perfectly fine, instructing Kana to avoid scams and watch out for carriages. Kana flashes a terrifyingly serene smile. A massive, horrifying aura of countless eyes suddenly erupts around the little girl, proving she has caught the exact same eldritch infection as the monster. Kana cheerfully assures her lady that nothing bad will happen, chillingly stating that it is absolutely impossible to be in danger when her lady is always watching over them. Inside the luxurious Rohan-sun carriage, Kana is practically glued to the window, absolutely mesmerized by the sparkling shops passing by. She enthusiastically suggests they hit up a dress shop and buy some fancy desserts for their lady. Hana instantly hits the panic button, horrified that Kana actually intends to blow the massive mountain of cash they were given. Kana looks slightly crushed, softly admitting she has never been anywhere this busy in her entire life. Instantly regretting being such a massive buzzkill to her previously bedridden sister, Hana caves. She promises they can go on a quick shopping spree on the way back, as long as they do not keep their lady waiting. Kana's face lights up with pure joy. She internally notes that Hana worries way too much, especially since their lady so clearly adores them. To prove her point, Kana fondly gazes at the cluster of floating, eldritch blue eyeballs hovering around the carriage, finding the horrifying demonic surveillance system absolutely adorable. She warmly hopes her older sister can finally find happiness after a lifetime of sacrifice. When the carriage finally pulls up to the temple, it immediately attracts the local gossip brigade. A group of nobles spot the Rohan-sun phoenix crest and aggressively start whispering. They debate if the count even has living children, bringing up the juicy rumor that the daughter kicked the bucket, joking that maybe she literally resurrected just like the mythical bird on her family crest. A smug noble confidently approaches the carriage, dramatically asking if he has the honor of speaking to the lady of the house. Hana nervously pops his bubble, explaining they are simply handmaids. The noble's face instantly morphs into a highly punchable sneer. He loudly roasts their perfectly fine outfits, claiming they are dressed way too plainly for such a public venue. Grinning like an absolute creep, he insults their lady for being incredibly thoughtless and cheap, dragging the Rohan-sun name straight through the mud. Hana starts sweating profusely, deeply regretting not buying those fancy dresses and feeling terrible for embarrassing their boss. But when she glances at Kana, her blood completely freezes. Kana is completely deadpan, radiating a terrifying, murderous aura. Hana vividly recognizes that exact chilling expression from the night the kidnapper was dragged straight to hell, and she internally begs her little sister not to publicly assassinate a nobleman. Suddenly, the obnoxious noble's laughter dies in his throat, and the entire crowd goes dead silent as our girl makes her grand entrance. Rewinding slightly to see how she got there, our girl is currently picking at her lunch back at the mansion, suffering from a massive case of separation anxiety. She dramatically whines about how long Kana and Hana have been gone, feeling exactly like an empty nester waiting for her kids to call. The butler politely reminds her that the maids probably have not even reached the temple yet and urges her to focus on her meal. The depressing vibe is violently interrupted when a terrified maid drops a salad plate and instantly hits the floor, begging for her life like she just committed high treason. Exhausted by the non-stop villainous treatment, our girl kindly waves off the apology, telling the trembling servant to just go get some holy water from the butler to calm her nerves. Completely miserable, our girl dramatically declares that she misses Kana so much it physically hurts and demands to go see her immediately. In a massive plot twist, the elderly butler standing behind her is actually Jelly, the grumpy wolf beast man, rocking a flawless magical disguise. He rolls his eyes, complaining that she is being entirely too overprotective of a fragile human, but he instantly folds anyway. Grabbing her hand, he uses his beast magic to teleport them straight into the parked carriage without triggering a single alarm. Our girl mentally praises him, thrilled that despite his constant grumbling, he functions as a perfectly obedient, magical taxi service. Right on cue, she overhears the smug noble outside running his mouth, loudly mocking her maids and calling her a cheapskate. Her blood pressure instantly skyrockets. Mentally declaring that the true Villainess has officially arrived to crash the party, she steps out of the carriage looking like a high-definition nightmare. Flanked by her disguised beast man, she locks eyes with the sweating noble and dangerously asks what exactly he was just discussing. Kana's face lights up with pure joy at the sight of her lady, completely dropping her terrifying murder aura. Our girl smoothly explains she came out because she was suffering from major separation anxiety and was worried about her maids. Hana's brain does mental gymnastics trying to process the situation. She innocently assumes Kana just talked back rudely because she grew up completely sheltered and has absolutely no idea how to navigate high society. Hana firmly believes her frail little sister lacks the physical strength to actually harm a grown man, entirely oblivious to the fact that Kana was roughly 5 seconds away from publicly assassinating a nobleman. Our girl confidently steps up to the smug noble, dangerously asking what exactly he was discussing with her girls. The noble's smugness instantly evaporates into pure panic as he realizes he is face to face with the infamous Lady Rohan-san. Sweating profusely, he scrambles for a lifeline, clearing his throat and formally introducing himself as Annulin of the Marquis House Benzine. He desperately lies through his teeth, claiming he noticed the maids looked lost and was simply offering to be their personal VIP tour guide. Our girl mentally rolls her eyes at his pathetic backpedaling. Dropping the polite act entirely, she calls him out for loudly using her family name as the punchline to a terrible joke. The noble completely freezes. Looking like an absolute high-definition dream in her crisp white dress, our girl strikes a pose and sharply asks if she also looks too poorly dressed for the temple. Internally, she chuckles, knowing she literally just grabbed a random, wrinkled outfit from the back of her closet. The noble stammers, completely failing to formulate a single coherent sentence to save his life. Before the noble's brain completely short-circuits, Commander Gabriel smoothly steps in from behind, declaring that the central temple will always welcome Lady Rohan-san no matter what she wears. The noble looks at the dashing knight like he just saw his personal savior. Gabriel issues a polite but lethal dismissal, thanking the young master for keeping the ladies company because he was running late. Seizing the golden escape hatch, the noble bows aggressively, stammers about having incredibly urgent business elsewhere, and sprints away as fast as his legs can carry him. Watching the coward flee, our girl internally roasts the handsome knight. She heavily questions his male lead credentials, wondering why he didn't instantly swoop in to save his fated heroine when Kana was actually cornered. She mentally advises him to significantly upgrade his reaction time if he expects to secure the romantic endgame. Gabriel turns his attention back to our girl, asking if she came to view the controversial new painting. She casually explains she originally just sent her maids on an errand, but got worried and decided to tag along to see the temple herself. She turns to Kana, offering the girls the chance to go see the famous artwork since they are already here. Kana is absolutely thrilled and eagerly accepts. When asked if she is joining the tour, our girl expertly declines, claiming she is going to the prayer room to pray. Internally, she aggressively refuses to lay eyes on whatever cursed monstrosity the temple is displaying. Gabriel immediately assigns a female knight named Odile to escort our girl to the prayer room. As Odile leads her away, Gabriel personally takes over as the tour guide for Kana and Hana. Our girl mentally sighs in pure relief, absolutely thrilled she dodged a one-on-one session with the handsome knight, fiercely begging the universe to make him lose all romantic interest in her immediately. As Gabriel walks the sisters through the temple, Kana gets straight to business, asking how his efforts to clear her lady's name are going. Gabriel sighs, admitting the investigation has completely flatlined because the controversial painting is drawing massive crowds and supercharging the rumors by word of mouth. While they walk, Hannah notices a crowd of wealthy nobles casually scooping water out of a decorative fountain. She asks if the fountain water is actually drinkable. Gabriel confirms it is premium holy water, explaining the temple uses it as an exclusive VIP perk for their most generous donors to aggressively flex their prosperity. Hannah's soul practically leaves her body for a permanent vacation. She starts violently trembling, staring at the literal fountain of miracle water. She remembers the sheer, absolute hell she endured just to secure a single tiny drop to save her dying sister, completely horrified that the rich are currently treating it like a complimentary beverage station. They finally arrive at the controversial artwork. Gabriel warns them that public opinion is violently split, with some finding it gorgeous and others completely repulsed. Hannah takes one look at the canvas and is instantly horrified. The painting is an absolute mountain of ugliness, looking so incredibly creepy that Hannah firmly believes a stray dog's death could inspire a better masterpiece. While Hannah is severely questioning the artist's sanity, Kana stares at the exact same cursed image. A serene smile spreads across the little girl's face as she casually agrees that the horrific painting is truly beautiful, leaving Hannah absolutely, utterly shocked by her sister's terrifying art review. And that's the end for today's recap. If you had fun, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Your support keeps the recaps coming. Choose your next binge. At the top is a crowd pleaser, and the bottom is the latest chaos drop. Thanks for watching. Stay comfy, keep your popcorn ready, and I'll see you in the next one.